Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Friday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week is Susan Wortzman. Susan is a partner at the law firm of McCarthy Tetrault and is the president of the wholly owned MT3. So she's a partner in the Toronto offices where she leads the firm's eDiscovery and information management practice. She was in 2020, she was named one of the top 25 most influential lawyers by Canada Lawyer magazine. She is the founder of MT3, formerly Wortzman's, which was recognized in its day because it's now part of McCarthy, as Canada's leading law firm specializing in e-discovery and information governance. Her expertise in e-discovery was developed during a long tenure as at one of Canada's leading litigation firms, where her practice encompassed a broad range of civil litigation, acting for corporate clients, then on and on. And like so many of us, I am sure she started with no e-discovery experience or expertise and took it to a very high level. Susan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Like most of us, I started with boxes of paper.
There we go. Those dirty, dusty boxes, and you never quite wanted to know what was inside when you pulled the cover off, right?
Something like that.
Something like that. So why don't you just take us briefly through your background from those boxes to where you are today?
Well, the boxes made me realize pretty quickly that I did not have a photographic memory and that I could not remember every piece of paper in those boxes, unlike a handful of lawyers who could. And so I started to reach to technology to help me manage the large volumes of information that were sort of crossing my desk. When I was an articling student, which is what we call them in Canada. So one of my first files I worked on, I was sent to London, England, and put into a warehouse with literally thousands of boxes. And it was, go through these all and figure out what's in them. So that really quickly led me to using an e-discovery tool, as rudimentary as it was back then, to help load all of the e-discovery, all the transcripts from the depositions. We call them examinations for discovery in Canada. And then, of course, loading in all of the records. So really quickly learned that the technology was the way forward, given volumes of information. I left. I was a partner. I was a litigator, so I had that deep experience. I was, a litigator on trials, so I understood that side of it, that piece of it. But I left to start my own firm, which was an e-discovery consulting firm, and then in 2017, my team and I joined McCarthy's, and where we have now a national team. And it's pretty interesting because it's supposed to be e-discovery and information governance, but it has, I suppose, blossomed well beyond that now. So we've become really the go-to for lawyers at the firm when they think about managing information and technology. So, the plan originally when we joined was that we would start off supporting the litigation group, and the next obvious one would be the competition law group, responding to Competition Bureau requests. Now we're also supporting the tax group from things like Canadian Revenue Agency, which there's lots of these days, audits. We support using sort of some of the same e-discovery tools and some of the AI technology that underpins it, our business law group, our real property group, and due diligence reviews. So it's really advising our clients and supporting our lawyers at the firm managing information. And what's interesting about it also is it all sort of intersects now because privacy's become so important. And so there's that privacy piece that impacts on most of the matters that we work on. And we're also really, really actively advising clients on privacy compliance in Canada and cyber readiness. So data and instance, breach response plans, supporting our clients post-breach when they're having to report to regulators on exactly what personally identifiable information was breached. So it's more than just the litigation matters that we originally worked on.
There are many law firms that where the people in the e-discovery function have never broken out and gone beyond the e-discovery function. How did that happen?
I think because we never say no. So the way our team is structured, it's really like that. The 3 in MT3, the people, process, technology, but it's really bringing together those disciplines. So we have technologists as part of our team, including developers, an engineer, and technical analysts. We've got project managers, and we've got lawyers. So we're about a third of each of those. And so when lawyers call me and say, I have a problem, where do I go? What am I going to do? We always say, let us figure it out. And it's organically grown so that we've become the go-to for the managing information piece. And from there, it really led to us building other client solutions. So I know it sounds odd, but we've also built during COVID a vaccine verification solution for clients who didn't want to have their employees' personal information about their vaccine status. We've built a contract management solution now that we're working on. So I think because of our experience using machine learning, using AI technology, having developers on our team, we've branched out from far beyond just e-discovery.
So let's step back a little bit. What took you to machine learning and AI in the first place?
It's really as the tools were built, as some of the technology and some of the machine learning functionality was built into the tools that we were using. So we were always game to use it to, maximum capacity that we could, every chance we could. But then it was always trying to be forward thinking and, how are we going to figure this problem out? So right now, I've had a professor recently connect with us and saying, I've got some grad students that are looking at some technology. What's a use case? So, my team will brainstorm and we'll think, okay, what's a use case for this new technology that we can think of tied to legal that will help us? So it's really all about, trying to build client solutions. So one of those problems that's never ending is privilege, right? Because that's a big issue in e-discovery for us all the time. We've got productions going out the door every single day, and we need to make sure that no privileged communications are going out the door. So that leads us to thinking right away, well, how are we going to use AI? How are we going to use machine learning to help us with that, as opposed to having lawyers sit and manually go through every single record that's going out the door and reviewing it for privilege, because we know that process is never going to be perfect. So how can we combine it and with machine learning to build the best product? Our answer to our clients is always the best result is usually a combination of the human and the technology. So how do we combine those?
So let's take that example, the privilege problem. How did you go about tackling that problem?
So we know that NextLP, for example, or Brainspace has built-in privilege models, so that we know other tools have those models. So how do we use those models? So our technicians will analyze them, and we've used them. And so we've used some of those out of the box models, and none of them work exactly the way we expect them to work or we want them to work. So, we dig deeper, and what we figured out in our experiences is that they just need more training, and they need more training from the actual set of records and the actual case. So it's great to start with some of the models that are pre-built models, but really it's about the supplemental training that's going to get us the best result. So, I've got a couple of examples on that, but we worked on a case recently, and it was the third case that we'd worked on for this particular client. So what we did, and we had to get through the records really quickly and really just do a privilege review. We took the data from the other two cases, and we took a sample of privileged records, we took a sample of not privileged records, and we used that to train and pre-build the model. And it was really, really successful. And then we had one of the subject matter experts go in, review also another few hundred records from the new case on top of it. And we ran the model, and it was unbelievably accurate and successful in identifying privileged records. And at the same time, we had the search terms, like we were running the privileged terms, and we had lawyers doing review. So we pulled out all stops. But at the end of the day, we were really, really pleased with the success of that. And the other sort of pre-built model example was we were conducting an investigation for a client into an alleged toxic workplace. So, we just thought, oh, well, there's a toxic workplace model, so we'll just use that. And it didn't work at all until we started training it in our environment with our clients' data. And then it worked. It was like the much improved version of it. So that's really the lesson learned for us, is that, information is different, and you can use the tools that are there, but they still need our advice, our experience, expertise, training, and legal minds looking, digging into it to train the system before it really gets us the results that we need.
With the first example you gave, where you had previous cases where you had already made privilege calls and brought that information in, how did you bring that information in?
We took samples from the previous cases. I may get this wrong. I think I might have to ask one of my analysts. And then we loaded it in. Okay. We loaded it into the new case, but it was like one client's data. So
you loaded decisions in then that were made about the documents and the decisions about the documents.
The coding, yeah. So okay. We said we'll pull from each case. We'll pull X number of privileged records that were humans had marked as privileged, and the same number of ones that were marked as not privileged. And we did that from the other two cases. We pulled them into this case and used it sort of as a seed set to train the model.
Okay. And you basically then said to the system, here, system, we like this stuff. We don't like this stuff. Go figure out what we like and don't like, and show us how well you can do the job for us. When you said that the results were good, how good were they?
You know what? I knew you were going to ask me that. I don't know. It was like fall out of my chair good. It was like I was expecting sort of a 70-75% accuracy. It was well over 90. It was like 97, 98% in that range. Someone on my team is going to correct me when I'm wrong, but like it was really how is that possible? That's awesome. But that was after a lot of training. Like we had multiple, inputs coming into that system, and then it was, we were very, very confident. And we sampled, like at the end of it, we sampled, we validated that the model was accurate. We pulled out, because we were pulling out records that were privileged and we weren't going to produce them. So we knew we'd have to put them on a privilege log at some point. So it had to be right.
Mm-hmm. In that process, then net, were you, same amount of time, but better quality, less time, better quality, less time, same amount of quality? How did it work?
It was so fast. Like we were able to get it done so quickly with so much less human review than we would normally do on that type of a case. So it was faster and like much lower on budget. Like we would have been, we planned the budget based on that we knew the process, but we'd built in a bunch of time for review, and we didn't need any of the time for review, like very little. So that was interesting, and that's super exciting. That's super exciting for us because we've been trying for a long time to crack the privilege problem. And as you know, like it's not, you just can't take those search terms and say, well, we're going to search all these terms and find all the privileged records, because we actually call them solicitors and lawyers. You call them attorneys, and lawyers in telecom speak different language than, lawyers who are working in the financial. So there's always that dialogue that's industry specific and company specific. So we were just lucky in that case because we happened to have data from that particular client.
When the next case comes along where you want to use this privilege model, what do you think that experience will be like?
So I'm not sure we'll use that model because it's that client's information.
Right.
So
what will you do?
We'll build the process. We'll build the same process for the next client. And I think it helped that we had data. It was faster because we had data from prior cases. Mm-hmm. But I also think we could do it just as easily with the existing data and getting that review started and being focused. So, you're running, you might be running a machine learning review for relevance going on, but you can always be doing that separate side-by-side process for privilege.
For your second example, I think it was the bullying model, the one you used.
Sorry, toxic workplace?
Toxic workplace, yep.
Yeah.
And where it did not work so well at first. How did you get from not work so well to useful?
Well, so first of all, it didn't work really well because part of it was because of chats. So we had hundreds of thousands of Teams chats in the collection, and because they're so parsed out, until we built that process, which was to bring all of the conversations together and then split them day by day. So each day becomes a conversation, which maybe could work. We hadn't done that yet. So those we just had to leave aside. Where it was really successful was with the email at the end of the day. And again, it was just more training. We just had to plug in more training on top of it. And then since then, so that was a few years ago, so Teams really exploded, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic. And so that was relatively early on. And we just hadn't built all that process around how we were going to manage and review Teams chats. Now we have that in place, so it would probably work better. But I think, it sounds like, big deals. You can figure out how to review Teams chats better, but it's something new, every single day. It's something new. So that's the key, is really saying, making sure that you've got that process and you're keeping that in mind. Like, you can't just take the model and say, well, we're going to throw all these Teams chats and hope this model works. Like, you have to, really think through how that information is going to be digestible, because it may not work with different types of information sources.
You mentioned earlier that you have taken AI and machine learning beyond the confines of litigation and traditional e-discovery and into other realms. You talked about a vaccination verification tool. I think you mentioned a contract management tool. How did that come about?
Okay, so the vaccine verification one did not have machine learning built into it. That one didn't, but the other ones all do. And they're really just helping. So, for example, contract management, that's, really training a system to look for certain contract terms and to be able to extract that data from contracts and then to logically, put it into a format so that organizations can understand their contracts better. So that's how we would, train a system. So train a model so that it knows how to identify what those provisions are, what, that you're looking for, whether it's a termination provision or whatever, the confidentiality clause in an NDA, whatever that is. So machine learning helps with that, because it's not just, if the clause looks like this, exactly like this, we're going to be able to find it. We used it. We've also built some other solutions, like we built a solution for mass action. So the firm was involved in a case where we had thousands of clients. They didn't do it by way of class action. And so we actually built a system where we had all of the clients online answer after we did a conflict search. They answered a questionnaire, they submitted it. It was like the questionnaire was long. It was really detailed. When we've done this again, it's about information about their damages, their insurers, their business, everything, their revenue streams, everything. They answer the questionnaire, they hit a button, they submit it, and then they get a link. They upload all their documentation. We loaded it into our e-discovery review platform, and then we used machine learning to be able to analyze that and to have our experts be able to look at some of the damages aspects of claims for us to understand who all the parties were in terms of defendants. It was beautiful to see some of the data visualization when you think of like thousands of claims, and you could go to the lawyers and say, well, here's actually what you have. Here's actually what you're looking at and what you're dealing with. Here's the volume of claims. These are the ones that, you can look at and think these will be the ones that you want to get to first, because you want to do them as your trial cases. So that's one way. I mean, typically, we're still using machine learning every single day in our cases. And I'm trying to think, like the last week example where the lawyer is saying, we've got this case, we've got about 3 days to do a review. We're just looking for some key documents to put into an affidavit. I just got off a call with them before we jumped on this call. And the client has 1.2 sending us 1.2 terabytes. And it's like, do people know how big that is? And so like, that's not 3 days of review, but, we'll probably, using machine learning, because they're only looking for some really key documents, be able to find those documents by doing a sample with subject matter experts, and really building a model of what they want, which is what's highly relevant, not what's relevant evidence. And then our review team will get started, and I guess we'll have to be done in 3 days.
For capabilities like these, especially ones that are outside of traditional e-discovery, do you need to go out and sell the idea to the solicitors and lawyers in your attorneys in your firm? Are they seeking you out? What's that dynamic like?
Well, I want them to understand what we're doing, because at the end of the day, they're going to have to explain it to their clients, or I'm going to explain it to their clients. And we want our clients, obviously, to understand what we're doing so that they're comfortable. So I'll generally start by connecting with the lawyers on the file and say, this is the plan. This is what we're proposing to do in this case for you in these circumstances. Does this make sense? And they'll say, that makes sense, or they'll say, no, I want to use search terms. And then I have to convince them why they don't want to use search terms and why that may not be the best idea, and that there's better technology. But I generally, we have a really innovative law firm. So generally the lawyers are pretty game to try it. And then sometimes, like when I'm taking clients' data from 2 prior cases, I need to get the client's consent. So then I'm on the call with the client and saying, this is what we're going to do. And fortunately, that client had enough confidence in the team. And I said, look, we don't know if this privilege model is going to work. It may not work at all. We got very little to lose, but let's give it a try. And the client was innovative enough to say, go for it. Absolutely. And it's hard to do sometimes when you're in the middle of a crunch, like when you're in the middle of a second request, or you're in the middle of an urgent investigation, or an audit. That's when it becomes problematic. And I just think it's worth it to get in front of those people at the outset and say, this is what we want to do. This is how it's going to work. This is the process. This is how we're going to validate whether it worked or it didn't work. And, we're pretty clear, we will validate whether it worked or it didn't, and we'll take that risk. Sometimes we have to say, we'll take that risk if it doesn't work.
Switching gears, you are, I would say, up in Canada, but for me, you're actually down in Canada. The Twin Cities being, I believe, farther north than Toronto. but you've got a different set of experiences, different set of perspectives. When you look at the Canadian market, when you look at the US market, markets elsewhere, what is your read on those different markets?
I used to always feel that we were, I don't know, 5-10 years behind what law firms were doing in the US. And now I feel like we're on par, like we're equal, because I think the borders have really disappeared in some ways in terms of accessibility to technology. And it's also resources. So we now have the resources to buy the technology that we want and to deploy it. So I think in terms of my experience, we are not lagging behind at all anymore in terms of the Canadian US experience. And then I also, sometimes I'm working with UK firms or EU firms, and I think, we're really as innovative, creative as they are in terms of e-discovery. I know probably people at smaller firms that don't have the resources of a whole team may feel like they're a bit in a different place, but I don't talk to my counterparts at US firms and find out that they're doing anything incredible that we're not touching yet.
How about, I don't know if you've had any experience to be able to compare with firms in Asia Pacific, Australia, Korea, Singapore, any of those places?
I really think we're all using similar process and tools right now. Like we've been on a few of those files where we're collecting from global collections from Middle East, Asia, around the world, and everybody's pretty much doing the same thing, or they're sending us paper boxes. It's just, like, so
nowhere in between, huh?
Yeah, it's like, and nice right now to be able to do some much easier collections, like remote collection has leveled that playing field, I think.
In the moments that remain, gaze into your crystal ball for me, if you will, and tell me what the future is going to look like for all of this. And we won't hold you to anything.
I have no idea. What I think is we're just going to keep having to get better because the volumes just keep increasing. And so eventually, somehow this is going to have to change. So I think the big change that needs to happen is better information governance. Like, and the EDRMs told us that from day one, that that's number one, is managing your information better. And if we can reduce those volumes of information that we're managing, it may get easier again. But right now it just seems to be going in the other direction because we're just regularly seeing these huge cases. And we really, really work hard with clients to target collections and not just send us the 1.2 terabytes or the 5 terabytes of information, but it's not happening. So because of that, tools are going to get better and we'll start using them more and more frequently. I think the models that we use, the AM models that we use, will get better just because we're going to have more experience and more people doing it. And so I don't know if that's anything so innovative to add to your crystal ball gazing, but
it's all just crystal ball gazing. We'll mostly get it wrong more than we get it right, I think, with that.
I think now, though, we're getting better with the information management piece because of all the privacy legislation that's coming in, and to be compliant with the privacy, the EU had it first with GDPR. We're now hitting it in Canada, but to be compliant with that legislation, organizations are just having to get a better handle on their information, and I think that's going to impact e-discovery as well.
That makes sense. Everywhere that the privacy concerns are becoming more and more dominant.
Yeah.
And another opportunity to try to use models and the like to see if they can help out. Well, Susan, thank you very much for joining us today. Susan Wortzman is a partner at McCarthy's in Toronto. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. And again, Susan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.